Hey, what is up, guys? Blunt Cuts here. This is a Watch Your Realms video. Thank you for tuning into my channel. I appreciate it. Please do like and subscribe if you do enjoy my content. I'm here talking about Glacius today, and I did a damage test that got some interesting results. I'm excited to share them with you. This dude right here is a solid addition to the game. I do like Glacius. Don't think he's perfect. I think that there are some issues with his kit. Certainly don't think that he is quite as good as some of the other stuff that I've seen about him seems to think he is. That's my perspective based on my testing. I think he's interesting, and there's a lot of things that I do like about his kit. But I think the thing about him that's so great is his versatility. He's got a lot of kind of nuance to his kit. He's not a crazy damage dealer. Does solid damage, not amazing damage. Maybe that's appropriate. What I'm going to do here today, I'm going to first break down Glacius's kit quickly. It's going to be a brief kit breakdown. And then I'm going to show you the Nightmare 1 Guild Boss run that I did my testing on. I compared Glacius to Nocturne, who I think is a very one-to-one comparison. They're both Northerner mages. Their base stats are very similar. They're both single-target mages, so I think there's a lot of parallels right there, and I think that they are a great comp to one another. And then I also brought in Silas. I wanted to compare Silas to them because I saw a thumbnail on YouTube a couple of days ago where the thumbnail basically seemed to imply that Glacius does more damage than Silas, and I think that is bonkers, just ridiculous. I had to test it. Spoiler alert, he doesn't do more damage than Silas. Maybe in some very specific instances, if you're going against very low magic resist enemies, and you've got like Gwendolyn or Vortex, or Gwendolyn and Vortex, and a Northern Lord, and you're just maxing out shields on him constantly, then potentially. So in some very unique circumstances, he might be able to do more damage than Silas. However, any kind of content that is even sniffs endgame in this game is not going to be a comp to Silas. I'm sorry to say. Like I don't know what. I can't stand the clickbait stuff. It really drives me crazy. So I wanted to test this, and I did. So I'm going to go through his kit right now real quickly, and then we'll get to the testing, and I will talk you through that. All right, let's start off with his talent here. So his talent reads, basic attack inflicts slow. It's a 50% slow for 2 seconds upon hit with a 20% chance to additionally inflict freeze. Deals 20% increased damage to targets inflicted with slow, and 20% increased damage to targets inflicted with freeze. I'm not sure if this is additive or multiplicative. Either way, I think he is going to do more damage, obviously, if you can get freeze and slow on a single target. I think he will get a significant damage boost that way, which is pretty cool. I think his interactions with slow, freeze, and then we'll find out later with shields are what makes this guy very special in a lot of ways. Not special enough, in my mind, to really overtake a lot of the other kind of S-tier heroes in the game, but he's a solid addition for sure. In any case, let's look at his basic attack. Magic attack deals 120% magic damage to one enemy when he is fully skilled up. That is pretty standard fare. Ultimate, it is a 900 rage cost ultimate, 600 initial rage. It's a 20-second duration when fully skilled up, and as you can see, he does get an extended range, basically getting a standard marksman range during the ultimate. So that is pretty cool. Basic attack turns into 3 consecutive strikes. Each strike deals 110% damage when fully skilled up, so less than the regular basic attack that he has, which is kind of interesting. Then for every 1% max HP of shield strength owned, increases damage by 1%. This is why I said that if you had him with Gwendolyn or Vortex, or you have a Northern Lord with him, he is going to do more damage because he gets a direct damage buff from having a shield. It's proportional to the size of the shield. It's very cool. Gotta love it. I think that there's some ways that this could potentially be exploited. The downside of it is that I don't think he really does enough damage for it to be so crazy that he becomes really desirable, right? That is what my testing kind of showed, but we'll get to that later on. His first passive gains a shield equal to 30% of max HP every 26 seconds when fully skilled up. It lasts for 10 seconds. Each time damage is taken, reduces the cooldown by 1 second. So if he's taking damage, he is going to get this skill back faster. However, one thing to note is that because his damage is tied to the size of the shield that he has, when he takes damage and he is shielded, the damage is also reducing his damage. So you're getting back around to that shield again, but on the whole, your damage is being reduced because you don't have the buff from the shield, so that is interesting. When the ultimate is activated, this effect triggers immediately and increases the shield strength obtained to, it says 40% right here, it's 60% when fully skilled up, so that's awesome. You do get a significant damage boost just by virtue of getting a large shield as soon as you do activate the ultimate, which is very, very nice. Moving on to Heart of Ice, his first passive. The hero possesses freeze immunity. Awesome, kind of like Ymir. Actually, did I skip one? Did I skip one of these? Oh no, it's his second passive, excuse me. Confusing myself over here. The hero possesses freeze immunity, deals 60% extra damage to enemies inflicted with freeze. If the target is immune to freeze, triggered by the talent, the hero inflicts Eye of Winter on them for 5 seconds when fully skilled up. I think it goes up to an 80% extra damage to targets inflicted with freeze when he is fully skilled up. So that is really cool. The Eye of Winter duration goes up to 5 seconds. So the nice thing about this is that even if you are attacking, say, like a boss target or an elite target that is immune to hard CC, such as freeze, such as stun, that kind of thing, if his talent triggers freeze, or would have triggered freeze, Pooh would be very upset. If his talent would have triggered freeze, then he gets basically the same effect or the same damage boost that he would have gotten otherwise for 5 seconds on them by way of this Eye of Winter component to his kit, which is nice. I like the fact that they are thinking through this and saying to themselves, like, this is a single target damage dealer. He's probably going to want to be used in boss fights or to take down high HP targets, but those targets are immune to the core mechanic in his kit that allows him to do more damage. So we are going to provide you with some way to work around that, which is very, very nice. I do like that quite a bit. In fact, honestly, I think it's actually probably better, right? Because I think his freeze is only, does it say? 2 seconds. His freeze is only 2 seconds, and there's not many freezes in the game that are more than 5 seconds, which is the duration of that Heart of Winter talent, so, or passive, excuse me. So very, very cool. Let's take a look at his details here real quick before we move on. So at A0, he does have about 11k HP, which is relatively high. I think that's probably because he is a northerner. Maybe it's not that high, but it's not low. Let's just put it that way. His attack is 4683. Defense, who cares? Magic resist, kind of high actually. That is kind of interesting. I don't know. I don't look at magic resist all that often, but I feel like it's usually around 1,000 or under. So 2357 seems rather high to me, but I could be mistaken about that. I'm not sure. Redeployment time, he does get a 55-second redeployment time because of his faction. And attack interval is 2.6 seconds. It's nice that it's not too slow, especially because he needs to be putting out these freezes over and over again, or the slows over and over again. So hitting more often is going to net him more damage and also more crowd control at the end of the day, which is very, very nice. Rage regen, 14 on his auto attack, or 14 auto, excuse me. Basic attack is 10 rage per basic attack, and then rage regen when he is attacked is 6 per hit. So interesting stuff. 19 costs, so pretty standard for a mage. Cool hero. I really do like his kit. One thought, something I didn't mention before. One thing I don't like about him is that this ultimate, when his basic attack turns into a 3-strike ultimate, the strikes are random. And while this may not be a big deal if you were facing a boss and there's only one target, obviously all of the strikes will go onto the boss. The fact that they are random does mean that it's going to be hard to rely on him to burn down a single target if there are multiple targets in the area. You're activating this ultimate. It is supposed to be the big damage boost for him. And if there's more than one target there, all of the strikes could potentially go onto the target that you don't want them to go onto. It's just not a great feeling, especially for a single target damage dealer who, you know, should be heavy single target damage, right? He should really excel in that. But during his ultimate, the boosted time, he's just not going to be able to consistently focus on somebody, and that is not a great feeling. Let's take a look at his awakenings real quick. So A1, when there's only one target in range, increases damage by 15% with an extra 15% damage dealt to targets inflicted with freeze. That's cool. Stacking more and more damage on top of frozen targets. I wonder, maybe there's going to be some kind of content coming in the future that does feature frozen targets, and he's going to be an MVP in that spot. It would not surprise me. We've had a number of different heroes come into the game recently where they have kind of like these weird synergies with freeze. Ymeric comes to mind. Somebody else, I can't remember who else came into the game with some freeze stuff, but Honora's got all the freeze stuff as well. So there's a lot of freeze going on right now. I wonder if that is going to become useful at some point in the near future. That would be cool. I would like that. A2, pretty standard, 300 attack. That is nice. Increases, this is the A3, increases the shield strength gained by 20%. I don't know if that is his shield or if it's other shields. If it's other shields, it's much better, obviously. But another 20% is not going to be sneezed at when he's gaining direct damage as a result of having higher shields. So that is a good thing. Then when shield increases damage up by 15%. So more and more damage increases. Can't complain about that. 8% crit rate on the A4. I think this is a better Awakening early game than it is late game when you have a more diverse gear set. I don't love it at this point. I think I would much prefer something that was not contributing towards a resource that was going to get capped at the end of the day. Crit rate, you're going to get to 100%. You don't want to stack anymore, right? So adding to it when you can already kind of reach that by default in most of your gear sets, it's not really doing all that much for you. So I don't love that, but you know, it is what it is. And then finally, the A5, upon receiving fatal damage for the first time, triggers Ice Barrier for 10 seconds, during which the hero cannot act or take damage. When it expires, the hero restores 30% HP and 100% rage, that's cool, and gains a shield equal to 50% of max HP for 10 seconds. So he's basically going to get unyielding, but he's going to get taken out of the fight for 10 seconds, stunned, basically frozen for 10 seconds, and then he's going to be able to act again. He's going to get 30% HP, 50% HP shield, so basically the equivalent of 80% health, and then he's going to get 100% rage, and at which point he's going to add another shield on top of himself as soon as he casts the ultimate, so he's going to get a big damage boost as soon as he comes back. I do think this is a really cool ability. You know, the problem is that he doesn't get it until you've pulled 6 copies of him, and I also think that it's just a little confusing to me because all of his other stuff is geared towards damage, and this doesn't, neither of the A4 or the A5 really add to his damage all that much. I mean, theoretically, the A4 does if you are able to pull in a piece of gear that you couldn't before, because now you've got more inherent crit rate, but that's very circumstantial, and I don't think him dying should not be the plan. So even though it is nice, and I think that maybe for like GVG, this adds a wrinkle into things, but I also don't think he's going to be very good at GVG because he's a single target damage dealer who has kind of, his slows are going to either be on one target or during the ultimate, potentially up to 3, but random, so not consistently on 3. I don't know. It's just, it's kind of a wonky kit. I think that there's some really cool things about him. I love that he's got this kind of like freeze and slow path where he's gaining this extra damage based on all of this stuff, and not to mention the shields. But it's I don't know. I've seen the damage and it's not overwhelming. So knowing that, all these other flaws or potential problems that I've seen as kit, they do kind of get magnified. So that is kind of where I'm at with it as I'm reading through this. All right, so this is the team that I did use. I am on Nightmare 1. And you might be wondering why. What's the point of testing on Nightmare 1? Well, it's not. I'm not trying to test Nightmare 1 specifically. I wanted to bring these heroes in to do a uncapped damage test where there's a set duration, 5 minutes, but the total damage is uncapped. And there's not really that many places in the game where you can do something like that. Even Guild Boss 2. As soon as you phase, like there's a finite amount of health in each phase as you go through. So there's no way to really test uncapped damage. This is kind of like a target dummy in my mind. Now, with that said, I do want to point out that this test and this boss in particular is heavily slanted towards the mages here, towards Nocturne and towards Glacius. Reason being that Silas, his calling card is ignoring defense, right? He ignores 100% of defense on his ultimate when he has the Vierna Bond skill. He also has a skill where I think it's every 5th hit, ignores 50% of defense. So he's notorious for being able to bypass high defense, which is the way that Moonton has traditionally scaled a lot of the endgame content. They've increased magic resist, increased defense. Now, the Guild Boss 1 has notoriously low magic resist and defense, meaning that the fact that Nocturne and Glacius cannot or do not ignore any of that, it is almost irrelevant because they are not going to have their damage reduced all that much by it. I think that it really puts the results into perspective at the end of the day. But with that said, I did auto runs of this where I placed basically the 3 DPS heroes. Obviously, I've got Aracha and I've got Hars in there as the lords. I've also got a Elowen in here for rage regen. Now, I know that many of you are probably thinking to yourself, well, Aracha gives much more damage than Hars does, and you are 100% correct. There is no argument for me there. However, what I would say is that matters, right? I mean, the faction matters at the end of the day. If he was a Piercer, I would be testing him with a Piercer Lord, but he's not, and so he is, unfortunately, the boost that he gets, because of the way that this game works, is going to come from a Northerner, and the Northerner Lord bonuses are just not all that great. Now, I could have brought in Elder, but if I did that, I would have felt compelled to bring in Eovar for Silas. I feel like Aracha and Hars are much closer to the Epic Lords than Elder and Eovar are to Aracha and Hars. So I feel like this is more representative of what most of the accounts have. So, and there's nothing crazy going on with boosts. Now, of course, if we brought in Elder and we brought in Eovar, the damage would be much higher, and these guys would be boosted. But I do think Silas would still be significantly ahead, as you're about to see. So, with that segue, as I've kind of given away the results here, let's get to the spreadsheet. Let's talk it through. All right, guys. So here are the results. Okay, so I'm just going to walk you through the spreadsheet real quick, and I'm going to explain to you basically what I found here. So we've got Glacius in column B, Nocturne in column C, Silas in column D. I've got all the different awakening levels here. So I have tested basically every time that I did a test, all of the heroes were at the same awakening level. So I did 3 auto runs on at A0, then I recorded the results, and then I moved on to A1. I awakened everybody, did 3 tests at A1, recorded the results, moved on to A3, awakened everybody at A3, did all the et cetera and so forth. So all of these columns, the columns and rows. So each of these tests, the heroes were at the exact same awakening level. I wanted to make sure that was consistent. I wanted to show kind of growth as they are awakened, and therefore kind of place a value on the awakenings, right? Especially from a DPS perspective. I will say that, this is a damage test, and there is utility, particularly on Glacius, that is not captured in here as far as whether it has value anyway. And I do think that had I used Gwendolyn and an Elder and Vortex potentially, that his damage probably would have been higher than it is shown right here. My counterpoint to that would be that if I take Silas into a lot of endgame content, he performs exceptionally well, and I don't think Glacius would, as far as a damage dealer anyway. I think he's probably has some uses, but I don't think he's going to do a lot of damage in a lot of cases. So that's my counterpoint to that. So, there's things we could have done on both sides that would have highlighted the heroes. I was trying to produce what I thought was a fair damage test, and as I mentioned before, this is heavily favored towards Glacius and towards Nocturne as opposed to Silas. Despite that, Silas was still significantly on top. We've got at A0, Silas did on average 62 million damage. Glacius was at about 54 million. Nocturne was at about 48 million. And then, so if you look at the column E over here with the delta sign at the top, Silas is at 100% for all of these because he was the top damage dealer every single time. These percentages are color-coded, so if you look at the blue one, that corresponds to Glacius. He was doing 87% of Silas's damage at A0. Nocturne, on the other hand, was doing 78% of Silas's damage. So, one thing that is interesting here, across all awakening levels, there were relative differences between the two, but the order of damage done was consistent, being that Silas did the most by a significant margin, Glacius did the next most, and then at the end, Nocturne was pulling up the rear and doing the least amount of damage in every single one of these awakening tests. So, going through here, you can see at A1, the gap widens. Silas gets more bonus or benefit from his A1 than the other two did, which was a little bit surprising to me. I thought that Glacius should have gained more damage, but as you can see, his average damage actually went down at A1 for some reason. I don't know why that is. I recognize that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. Maybe there's something in the code. Maybe he was hitting shields more often, but the shields are so small in Nightmare 1 that really shouldn't play a role here. If you don't know, the shield damage is not included in the damage total that you see at the end, so there are times when it may be artificially low. Yeah, the damage you see may be artificially low for some heroes if a big chunk of their damage ended up going into the shield, but as I said, the strength of the shield is so low on Nightmare 1 that I don't see that being a reasonable explanation here. Yeah, I'm not really sure what might have happened there. Maybe there is some kind of bug. I don't know that, and I don't have any reason to think that other than the testing here, which you should see a 15% damage increase, basically, based on his A1, and there was not one present. You might think to yourself, well, maybe he had less ultimates. Maybe, but I don't see how that would have been possible because there's nothing that changes his rage regen. His gear was the exact same, so I don't know what it was that changed that, but it's interesting. You know, we see a dip at going from A3 to A5 as well, where he did less damage. So clearly something is going on in his kit, and maybe it has to do with him proccing that freeze simulating talent or whatever, where he hits a boss. If it would have frozen somebody, if he procs the freeze, but it can't freeze, then he gets 5 seconds of increased damage as if they were frozen. Maybe this is just RNG playing out, and maybe he's just an inherently RNG-based hero, because if he doesn't get those procs, then he doesn't do as much damage. So, in any case, moving forward, like I said, at A1, he was doing 83% of Silas's damage. Nocturne, on the other hand, was doing 81%, so much closer there. And then at A3, this is when Silas and him were the closest. At A3, he did 91% of Silas's damage. However, as I noted, at A5, when his damage should not have gone down, but it did by almost 3,000, or excuse me, 3 million damage on average almost. At A5, he was doing 77% of Silas's damage. Now, Silas was doing significantly 10 million damage on average more than he was doing on his previous run, topping out at 78 million. But Silas is basically doing about 30% more damage than either Nocturne or Glacius at that point. You can see that Glacius and Nocturne are very close again at A5 as well. So I think very similar damage at the end of the day. Nocturne is, in my opinion, it's kind of an underrated hero, especially because of the true damage component. Now, he actually gets around some of that defense issue that I was talking about, or I guess magic resist in that case, because he does do true damage on his ultimate. And on top of that, he does true damage inherently at A5. He gets bonus true damage because I think the first 3 hits of his ultimate automatically trigger true damage, which should theoretically make him more viable in later content. Glacius does not have that benefit, so I don't know if that is going to be the case. As far as the gearing is concerned, all the tests, all the heroes were done using Warlord pieces on the left side, Infernal Roar on the right-hand side. Every single one of these heroes was in 2 times attack percent pieces, 1 times crit damage pieces. You can read through this here, but you can see that the stats are all very, very similar. They are all within about 5 speed of one another. There's not much variation in the crit damage. The crit rate, they were all crit capped, obviously. There is a disparity between Glacius and Nocturne's attack and then Silas's attack. Glacius and Nocturne are about 16 attack apart, and then Silas is about 3,000 attack less than them. However, it should be kept in mind that Silas's base attack at A5 is about 800 less than theirs, so that is why there is a discrepancy there. As far as artifacts are concerned, Tear of Twilights on Glacius and Nocturne, Spirit Siphon on Silas, all artifacts were level 25. So that is what the testing showed me. I just can't emphasize enough that even as close as they were, let's say like at A3, where Glacius was doing 91% of Silas's damage, if you were to take Glacius into an area where there was a high magic resist enemy, he would not perform very well. Whereas if you took Silas into an area where there was a high defense enemy, he would perform very well because he can bypass the defense. It's just, they're not heroes that are on the same level. And as much as I like Glacius, as much as I like him, I think that there are some inherent issues with his kit, his dependency on freeze and slow. You'd like to think that, hey, he brings extra crowd control, right? Where that should be his calling card, that he can slow and he can freeze and all this stuff, which is great, except for the fact that he's all single target. And so when do you really want a lot of crowd control? Typically, you want it when there are packs of enemies, right? And he's not going to do a good job of crowd controlling more than one enemy at a time. In fact, even one enemy, he's going to have trouble crowd controlling if there are multiple enemies around him. So he's going to be inconsistent in that way. He's not a bad hero. Obviously, he does good damage, right? I just think he's more of a Nocturne level hero where he's a good hero, but he's not great. And he's probably, if you're an endgame player, you've got a diverse roster, you're probably not going to need him. Now, with that said, there are some aspects to his kit that are very compelling. The freeze immunity, the synergy with freeze, the shields, all of that is very, very cool. And I could very much see there being some new content that really utilizes his skill kit, especially since they have brought a bunch of freeze heroes into the game. Would not surprise me if there was some content coming down the line where freeze immunity and synergy with freezes does become a very important aspect to some future kind of content. But as of right now, I don't think that there is a spot where he is going to be exceptional. And even in GVG, I think the only time you might want to use him in GVG is if you got him to A5. And even then, I don't know that you're really going to want to use him that way because he doesn't bring great CC. And it's all single target damage, so that is not ideal. That is a recipe to get popped in GVG. On top of that, GVG higher levels anyway, you've got very high magic resist and very high defense units. So I don't know. We'll see how it works out. Maybe I'm wrong about this, but I based on what I'm seeing here, I'm not convinced that he is going to be a viable endgame hero. I think he's going to be a filler hero. I think if you're a newer account, if you're mid-game, early game, he's going to be great for you. You're going to love him. And honestly, as an endgame player, you might want to get him just to kind of fill out your Pokédex and for completeness. He's got some unique things to his kit. Always good to have unique heroes on your roster. But I think he's the kind of hero that you're probably going to dust skill, and then he's going to sit in your inventory until they release some kind of content that is specifically for him. So that is my thought. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I do hope this was helpful. I am going to share a copy of this spreadsheet. There will be a link in the description of this video, and I'll also have it in a pinned comment at the top of the comments section of the video. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please do like and subscribe. Good luck on your pulls this weekend. I will catch you all next time.